Hello there, this is Heather Quick with Florida Women's Law Group. Thank you for joining us today. I have today with us Anna Durstein, one of the associate attorneys here at Florida Women's Law Group. And we are going to talk about a really interesting topic that a lot of individuals face with divorce and then maybe even post-divorce, and that's the issue of relocation. We're just going to dive right into it. Of course, you can always comment and put questions on the video so that we can address them, if not during the video, later. First, Anna, you've had a lot of cases with relocation, haven't you?
Yes, and I just had one actually that we went to trial on as well that was pretty successful too.
And that's a hard thing to win at trial, isn't it?
It is. It's very fact intensive, and it takes a lot of work to prepare not only the client for it, but also ourselves as well, to be able to show the judge everything that is necessary and show the court how it is in the best interest for the client and the children to relocate.
Now, in this latest case that you had, was it during a divorce or was it, years after the divorce and the mom wanted to move? What happened?
It was during the divorce. So it was an initial action. So they still were all living here in Florida, and it was an initial action during the divorce. She determined that she wanted to relocate to be closer to her family, which was in a different state, and the husband was currently living here in Florida, so we had to request the court for that. So, and that was a strategy point that she and I discussed from the start as well, and in her case, it was important to kind of act on it at that time, and it differs obviously for everybody, but in that case, it was the perfect time.
Well, and that is interesting because, we've had a lot of these cases over the years, and they are some of, I think, the harder to win because it's very fact intensive. We need a lot of witnesses, and really, and in a lot of ways, it's harder than a case. And I think most of the time, cases that we're really dealing with issues of children and time sharing are more difficult,
right?
Because numbers are numbers, and you can hire an expert, and they're going to read the numbers. But then, how do we use an expert if we do in relocation? I know how I've used it in the past, and what have been your experiences? Where was it helpful? Was it not? Did you need it?
As far as experts, I've definitely have lots of witnesses, family members besides the parties as well testifying, experts. In the past, I've worked and I talked to somebody. This wasn't for this case that I used one for, but psychologists, there's child psychologists that help out with the relocation, and they talk to the court, they interview the parties, they interview it's a little mini, essentially kind of custody evaluation that could be done, and that could help the court as well, and they're experts in that field as well. But it is so fact specific, and every case just depends on what kind of experts you can use. Teachers are always helpful, counselors and things like that to come in and talk to the judge as well, to kind of give a little bit more of an idea of what is best for the kids. But having a list of witnesses is very important, and that's something that starts on a planning from the start. As soon as someone decides that relocation is necessary, we start the plan for what are we going to get you there.
And I know and the thing is, there's lots of different kinds of relocation, just for our watchers to understand, and these women. So, one that I had, certainly you're remarried, or you are remarrying, and your husband gets transferred. And those are tough.
That's right.
Because, we're still looking at the best interest of the children, and, are we going to pull away? What are they even going to do? But then the father left here, the court puts a lot of weight on that, don't you think?
I think so too, yeah. And a lot of it does have to do with involvement that the father does have with the children as well, currently and for the future. If it's somebody who hasn't seen their children at all whatsoever, and then all of a sudden wife wants to move to a different state because her new husband has a job, and now all of a sudden he wants to be in the children's lives. The court looks at things like that. And even if there is a dad who is a part of the children's life, and he is a constant, I guess, in that way, there are ways to be able to still foster relationships, and that's a plan that clients, again, we come up with for that, so that we can show the court that it's going to continue. Just because somebody's in a different state, it isn't going to stop that relationship, and there are ways around that. And there's always usually a financial benefit for relocation. Like you said, as far as a husband has a job transfer, somebody's likely accepting a job because of a financial benefit to that. So that definitely helps too with the relocation.
Or having family.
Yes.
We've had several of those, and within this area, in really anywhere in the country, but people are very mobile, and so maybe both folks are from, I'll make up a state like Colorado,
Right.
but they end up here, and this is where they're getting divorced.
Right.
But now we've got, our client, the wife, mother, and she's like, all my family
Right.
lives there,
Mm-hmm.
and he, and this is a good one, and he's in the military, he's going to be gone.
Right.
Who's going to help? And yet then I can live with
Mm-hmm.
them, or have, maybe instead of paying childcare, have that. So, I think we've had a few of those, and that,
Right.
but it's not that easy though. Still,
It's not easy. It's very, it's very hard to do those. Like I said, it's very fact specific. Every case is so different. But like you said, with the military families, especially here in Jacksonville and in the surrounding areas, there's a ton of those. And
Mm-hmm.
they're deployed. You're right. There's just mom who doesn't have any family here and is now has to work at the same time as take care of the children, take care of all of their day-to-day doctor's appointments, any sort of things with schools and things like that. And it could be very difficult. And the court looks at that, and they do consider that as part of a reasoning for a potential request for the relocation, which is important. It can't just be because I just hate the sunny Florida. There is a request, so it definitely helps to have those facts. But
and that, I think it's important too. And also there's so many companies relocating here. A lot of people come here from other areas, but then when you're in Florida and that's when the divorce is happening, it's important to know you can't just leave with your kids.
You cannot.
And more than 50 miles, right?
50 miles.
We've had a few, but after a period of time. I think the strategy that we talked about and really having a plan.
Yes.
Absolutely. Plan is required.
It's required. Not only is it required by the court, but a plan, sometimes having a very well thought out plan from the start could lead somebody to end up agreeing to something, and then you do save the time and having to go through the litigation because you prepared, you presented a plan that was appropriate from the start. That leaves it open for the other person to agree, and then you don't have to go through the lengthy litigation and possibly put yourself through that. So.
And I think, for anybody, because we've talked to so many women and they're like, well, I'd really like to move, here and move back somewhere. And, it's one of those issues. And I think that's a common thing that I know you and I've had those discussions. Do we do it now or do we do it later? In some cases that I've had where within the original divorce, my client knew at some point that she was going to want to move.
Yeah.
But it wasn't ripe, meaning we didn't have enough negotiating tools at the time to, because I think that's important.
That's
and
true.
we talk about it with negotiating, there has to be a give and take
if
you're going to settle it. But even so, if it's so one-sided and the other person's not going to get anything, I think it's very unlikely you're going to prevail in court because the judges are trying to be
it's harder,
equitable and saying, okay, well, we can do this if you do that. And
it is hard, It is hard, and like we talked about earlier, it is very important to kind of make that plan from the start. Make sure that our client, we know that is your plan and that is your end goal, is that eventually could happen. Because sometimes maybe it is beneficial to do it later. Sometimes maybe financially it's even not right at that point. But it's something that has to be discussed from the start, and we have to go through the factors, and we have to go through the ifs, buts, and cons and pros, and all of that, because it's so important to know that.
And I think so, just like you said, like when we're in the initial divorce, that's why your attorney, always asks you, well, do you want to stay here? Do you have family here? Because in the one case in particular, and others we've done, maybe we're thinking 3 or 4 years down the road, but we can set you up strategically, maybe to have some negotiating power in the original divorce, knowing your end goal 3 years from now.
Absolutely.
Because there's always, if there's alimony, if there's financial gain for most husbands, fathers, you can give them some incentive.
Of course.
Not always,
but it's definitely
always,
a plan.
but,
Again, like I said, if it's something that we know of from the start, we can use that and work it in together in the bigger picture. If it's something that we're given the day before a trial, it's impossible. There is nowhere to go from that. It's something that, again, like I said, it has to be planned out. It has to be planned from the start. Months and months, and that could go into it, but it has to be planned. And we can ask the specific questions, and we can prepare for that possible move.
Right, because you do have to ask, and I have been involved in cases many years ago, but where we got involved afterwards, but the person had just left. The judge will make you return the children, and that can be really traumatic. It's just never a good idea because you just put yourself and your children at risk of so much trauma of having them say, no, move back, you can't go.
Yeah, you never want to be in that position for sure in front of a judge, because then you're still, once you come back, there's obviously a continuing part of the litigation. It continues, and now you judges had to order you to come back with the children. It doesn't look very good. So you definitely, again, the planning is very important. It can't be something that somebody just thinks of the night before and then packs the kids up and then leaves. I mean, children are in school, they've got certain things that have to be taken care of, and it has to be planned always.
All right, so let me ask you this. So the client comes to you and is like, well, I'm engaged to be married. Is that a slam dunk?
No.
Nope.
It can't be.
Even though he lives in California, we're going to have a great life.
No, it depends. Again, like I said, every single case is different.
Right.
That's where the information gathering begins. What's going on with the dad? What's going on with the financials? What's going to happen? How old is this child? How often is this child seeing the father, and how often are they involved as far as there any sort of visitation too? So it is not a slam dunk. It's a very fact intensive, like I said, but it's possible. Absolutely, that's happened before in that specific situation where somebody was moving to a different state because they were engaged, and they actually in that case they agreed, because it was, again, like I said, we planned it from the start. We presented it in a way that was favorable for both parties, and it was fair and equal, and both parties and everyone agreed.
One of the things I know we've both been had cases in the past where one of the factors, and there are, 16, 20, there's a lot of factors. And they don't always, you can't always get everyone in your favor, but that's what we're working to do, is like, how can we prove this? But is, the likelihood that their father, your ex, your current husband, would relocate also. And, just in the job market we have now, in the world we have now with technology, and so many people work remotely, that happens more often than not than it did even 10, 15 years ago. I think we're seeing more of that ability for individuals to, move and have that option.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things, again, we consider is, what is this person doing? I mean, is it something that they can do in a different state? I've had cases where the husband was working here remotely, but the location where they wanted to relocate would have been the primary hotspot hub for his company. So, I mean, he was already remote, so it wasn't a big change. And there wasn't, the only reason they were here could have been something else, a family reason or something beforehand. So, absolutely. There's times when sometimes the spouse is unemployed as well. So that makes a big difference. I mean, they don't have a job available in this market, and we can get an expert to come in to show that there are available jobs in the market where the client potentially wants to move. So it kind of helps them from that perspective too, and shows the court that they have jobs available there, and it's going to be even beneficial for the other spouse to move.
Let's go back to the experts though on the psychologist, because I know I've used that in the past, and we know certainly several of the experts who do that. Just for the women watching, so they understand, like, what's going to happen with that, because we usually can get that appointed. I mean, you may have to pay for it, of generally, if that's the expert you want. But what in your experience have they done that is helpful for the court to know?
They've interviewed both the parties. They've interviewed the children even sometimes, and in a case one time too, the psychologist went to the location where the proposed relocation would have been happening, and obviously again, with the cost in mind and things like that, there would cost, they would have to be paid for that. But he did a home study in the new home that the children would be moving into, because in that situation, my client was moving in to live with her parents. So then, he did a home study in that area. He had ideas for the schools. He went to the schools that they would be. He even talked to the counselors. And again, every case is different. In some cases, the judges are going to completely, some certain things are going to say, hey, I'm not going to listen to that. But others, it was very important, because then they had all that information. They had a report about that. And it was helpful. And that, so it just depends. But they can do a lot. They can definitely do a lot.
And I think it really helps for, from our standpoint, because you never want to go to trial or in a hearing where it's just, your version versus your husband's or ex-husband's.
Right.
We really need more objective
parties
and evidence for the judge to consider, because, obviously each one is talking about their own interests, and it doesn't mean, and I'm not even supposing anybody's being dishonest. It's just, they need to know, and especially if you're going to move to another state, it's really hard for the court to get grasp the idea of what is that going to look like for the children, because that's
Right.
really what they care about,
Right.
is the kids.
Absolutely. That's the bottom line. That is the only. It's not in the best interest of mom. It's not in the best interest of dad. It's what is the best for the kids. So, it is. It is.
And what about how does it affect time sharing? Because you've done so many in the past few years.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some things that you talk about the clients with, like as far as, because I know it's important to be creative and giving,
Right.
and time sharing maybe more than you already have ordered or agreed to, in order to, further what you're wanting for you and your children.
I mean, it's big. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Once the relocation happens, that's the number one thing that's going to change, is the time sharing and the visitation with the children and the father. So that's a big thing to consider. There's tons of different ways to go about it. The first thing is obviously the transportation. There has to be some sort of logistical way that we're going to have to figure out, how are we going to do the transportation? Are you going to meet 75% of the way so that he's more agreeable to your relocation with the children? Are you going to pay for 75% of the flight or 60% of the flight? Are you willing to pay 50-50 so that he doesn't lose the time sharing and he keeps it available to him? Are you willing to give him a little bit more time during a spring break or a time when the children are out of school to help to help the husband or the father to see that it's not your goal to take the children away from him in that way? Because that's the first thing that all the dads and the husbands kind of harp on right away, is, you're taking away my children from me, I'm never going to see my kids. So strategically we look from those kind of perspectives, and we already pre-plan, this is the kind of things that we're going to propose, these are the kind of things that we're going to discuss or we're going to tell your husband, so that we would be able to come to an agreement. And that it helps. I mean, you are going to have to give some, like you said. I mean, there's got to be a give on both ends, because if your primary goal is to get there, you're willing to do some of that.
I think that can be depending on, the relationship, the history between the parties.
Of course.
That's your move to get them away from the kids. But don't think the judges aren't keeping that in their mind, because they're like, okay, if this is ultimately going to be my decision, I want to make sure there's a plan in place so that these children are still seeing both of their parents.
And there has to be a specific plan. That's one of the biggest things we plan. We can't go to court without presenting a plan. You can't even go to court without asking to relocate, without having a plan for what you're going to do to ensure that the children get to still see the other parent. It's important. And again, obviously every case is different. Domestic violence and things like that are involved. There's different cases. If there's injunctions, and there's different factors. These are just the typical, the standard cases that we would be talking about.
And just on that point, and I think we've both had that experience when, yes, okay, it may help get to an agreement, but at the end of the day, we do litigate these, and these go to trial.
They do.
But I think when we go to trial and we have it clear, and our client is testifying, listen, this is not to keep them from them, and this is what I think, whatever he wants or whatever I can do to facilitate the contact, goes a long way. Yeah, it really does go a long way. I mean, it has to be genuine. So you've got to really understand, if you want that, you got to be willing to understand and appreciate the value the court places on both parents' involvement with the children. And
in my case recently, my trial that I just recently had, the judge went specifically out of his way to make it as a finding how much the mother was going to continue fostering the relationships, and all the things that she was willing to offer, and all the things that she was going to do to help the relationship move forward with the children and the father as well. So he made a specific finding just because of that, because of the testimony that she provided.
And it really is important. It's one of those things, and that's why it's so important anytime you're in a legal situation that you really get that guidance, because it's all in the way you present it. Yeah. And I mean, without it presented the right way, and things that you wouldn't have even thought of, and understanding how the judge is looking at it. Because when we, have had many clients, and probably even us, if we, we're like, we have this offer, most of the time we're thinking, well, this is going to be better for the kids because it's going to be better for me. And it's really, we have to really step back and make sure that we are emphasizing how is this going to be just as great for the kids.
For the kids, yeah. And that's that's the plan from the start. Again, you got the overarching theme essentially on that, but that's how we come up with the plan and the strategy, the evidence, and the testimony that the clients work with and present to the court.
Well, thank you, Anna, so much. And for anyone with questions about relocation, if it's something you've wanted to do, you're thinking about, or you are thinking about divorce, but that is going to be something that's going to come up. It's really important, as Anna said, make sure your attorney's asking you those questions and helping you understand what it's going to take to get there. Because one, if you don't ask, you never know, but you don't just go into the court and say, hey, judge, can I move? It really requires a lot of strategy and thinking and planning out, but it can be done most times. And it's always worth considering and looking at what will this take before saying, no, it's not worth it, or maybe it's not the right time.
Ask
it's
the
just
question.
you gotta ask the question, gotta dig into it, and really have some good advice so that you can take those steps forward. Really appreciate you watching. Please subscribe and follow and share this video with someone who may need this information, and then you'll be updated on the next videos. Later on, probably later in June or later in the month sometime, we will bring in an expert to talk about relocation. So if you're subscribed, you'll know those are coming up as well. Thank you so much.